This video is sponsored by Butterfork. More about them coming up shortly. Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Chinese comfort food classics with a shot at a saucy wet beef chow fun. Now, those following along with this channel may know that we have actually done a pretty popular beef chow fun recipe in this series already, which made use of a crispy Mongolian beef style flank steak in our stir fry to create a crisp and delicate beef chow fun. For our version today, however, we'll be exploring one of the many variations that exist for this dish, with a dive into what's colloquially known as a wet beef chow fun, or beef chow fun with gravy. What does this mean? I'll explain. Most commonly, when you come across beef chow fun in Cantonese restaurants, you'll find it offered as wet or dry, with the latter option describing the version that you've probably most commonly come across. A thin, delicate chow fun rice noodle tossed with veggies and velveted steak in soy sauce to create the smoky, crisp, and umami-packed noodle stir-fry that you know and love. The wet, alternate version of this dish is assembled very similarly with the same ingredients, but instead of being tossed together and combined in the wok, we'll be cooking the proteins separately from the noodles in a thickened sauce base, then serving on top of our chow fun noodle, yielding a much saucier, gravy-based final result. Which version is better? Well, let's find out. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so diving right in, we're kicking things off here first with some aromatic veggies for our stir fry. Today that's going to be 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic to start, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of fine minced ginger, and the whites of 3 or 4 green onions sliced thinly. Then we're reserving these greens of our green onions and slicing them into planks to head into our stir fry at the very end to keep these nice and crisp. Moving on to the remainder of our veggies here, this is half of a medium white onion that I'm separating by layer, then slicing into strips, followed by a whole red bell pepper flipped on its head and sliced similarly as well. As always, remember to pull off the pith of your bell pepper, or else you'll find yourself wondering why your bell peppers always taste so bitter. Moving on to our beef next, I've got a pound of flank steak here sliced into 1-inch pieces, which I'm doing my very best to slice against the grain as much as possible to create the most tender piece of beef that we can. Obviously, you are eventually going to have to slice with the grain at some point, but you'll notice that there's really only one major slice that I'm making with the grain, with the remainder of the cuts all going against. Next up, now in my opinion, this might be one of the most important steps in really any flank steak dish, but especially beef chow fun. We're going to velvet our beef using a teaspoon of baking soda dissolved in water, then combined with our steak for 10 minutes before draining. The alkaline in our baking soda helps to break down the protein bonds of our steak, yielding the soft, tender piece of beef that you know and love from basically every beef stir fry that you've ever had, or well, at least every good one. The key here is that once it's done velveting, we also want to drain this residual baking soda before marinating, or else it could leave a metallic aftertaste in your stir fry. For our marinade today, we're keeping things fairly simple since this is such a sauce-heavy dish already. This is 2 tablespoons of full sodium soy sauce here to start, followed by half a teaspoon of white pepper and a single tablespoon of sesame oil mixed to combine. Then we're letting this marinate for 15 minutes while we dive into our chow fun next. Okay, so moving on to our noodles. This is a single pound of fresh chow fun that I'm working with today. If you don't happen to have access to fresh chow fun though, don't panic. Dry pantry stable versions of this noodle also exist and just require a little bit of rehydration. For our fresh noodles though, I'm just pulling these apart so that they separate in the wok. These noodles are very delicate, so we don't want to have to work them in the wok too much or else they'll break, as we'll see in a moment. Last up, this is our sauce element, which more or less comes entirely from our dry beef chow fun recipe, focusing on big, bold umami drivers. This today is 2 tablespoons of full sodium soy sauce here to start, followed by a half teaspoon of dark soy sauce, a full teaspoon of oyster sauce, and a tablespoon of black vinegar. Then rounding this out, this is a tablespoon of fermented black bean. My personal favorite is this Lao Gan Ma version that's fermented in their chili oil for those looking for it. Moving on, before we head over to the stove, I want to take a minute and talk about this Nakiri knife that I've been using for the last month or so, made by Butterfork. Butterfork's knives are designed for comfort and stability for everyday use. All of their knives are thoughtfully designed for ease of use and comfort, even over the course of a long day of prep work. Now, I'll be absolutely honest, when these folks reached out, I thought, this is kind of kitschy, you can change the handle color, so what? Which, if that gets you excited, then hey, this is the knife for you. For me personally though, what really impressed me about this knife wasn't the variety pack of colors, but just purely the design elements that really blew me away. First and foremost, I want to talk not just about how sharp this knife was when it arrived, but how sharp it still is. Out of the box, they can do this tomato thing that you see lots of TikTokers do all the time, which is pretty crazy, but maybe more importantly, this is the same Nakiri knife that I used in this video almost an entire month later. And y'all, let me tell you, I have used this knife pretty much every single day for the last month, some days 5 to 6 hours at a time. I also have not done anything to sharpen this knife other than straighten it with a steel, and it is still this sharp, y'all. That's pretty crazy to me. Second, and maybe equally as important, I love the weight and balance of this knife too. It's particularly light and just a touch heavier at the tail, which has made it pretty comfortable to use for really long prep days, where heavier knives like my Sabatier start to hurt my arm after a while. The spine has been thoughtfully smoothed out to prevent chafing, and the handle sits nicely in my hand too. So check out the link in the description for 5% off your first order at Butterfork. Alright, so over on the stove, I have my wok heating up over medium heat today. Then I'm adding about 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and, as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then going in here first is my flank steak, about 15 to 20 pieces at a time, spread evenly across the wok for as much surface area contact as possible, then seared for 2.5 minutes before tossing with the wok tilted downward for wok hay. If we've done this correctly, the added fats in our marinade should give us some nice smoky qualities when we toss, like so. Moving on next, now full disclosure, this is where I think things took a little bit of a turn for me today. The many resources that I consulted here advised par frying our chow fun in soy sauce and Shaoxing wine to give it a slightly crisp texture. Now, personally, in my opinion, I think that this is gonna stick to the wok because unlike chow mein, chow fun is super delicate and pretty tricky to fry, which is in fact pretty much exactly what happened. Not great. But that said, I think this is still fairly salvageable, and I also think this may have been mitigated if we had done this at a slightly higher heat. Don't do this over medium heat like me, or else you'll get this. Moving on to our stir fry next, I've reheated my wok over high heat this time, then added an additional 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and done 1 more long yao. Then here's my aromatic veggies going in first, here's my garlic, ginger, and the whites of my green onions going in. We're blooming this for about 15 seconds until nice and fragrant, then following up with my bell pepper for about a 1-minute head start before adding in our onions. I'm sauteing this for another 1 to 2 minutes until just slightly cooked but still crisp, then adding my beef back to the wok and tossing to combine. Rounding this all out, here's my sauce element going in, followed as promised by a full cup of chicken stock, then immediately thickened with a cornstarch slurry. Remember, we're not reducing here or else you'll end up with boiled veggies. I'm just tossing this until our sauce thickens, and that's it. Finally, here's my green onion planks going in just over residual heat now. Then we're serving this all over our chow fun and we're ready to eat. Okay, so if I had to guess, I would say that, at least in my own personal experience, this wet beef chow fun is the less common version of beef chow fun that most folks would identify. I think the wok-tossed version just comes up in Chinese takeout a lot more for no real reason that I can think of, honestly. Obviously, the main difference here is that there is a thick sauce base going on that more thoroughly coats the noodles on our plate, sort of like a stir-fry over rice would do. In a dry beef chow fun, we wouldn't have added that full cup of chicken stock, so the sauce instead would have just reduced and clung to the noodles. I would say that in the dry version, there is a little bit more crispness to the veggies that I'm missing in this wet version, mainly because inevitably the stir fry itself is sitting in a bed of sauce, so the residual heat is going to continue to cook our more delicate veggies like our onions and leafy greens. On the other hand, I do also enjoy the thicker and more plentiful sauce that coats our noodles, which is sort of soaking into the bed of chow fun nicely. Ultimately, I think the two are just really completely different dishes, so if you've been writing off wet beef chow fun on the menu, this is your sign to try it. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated to classic Chinese dishes, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice YouTubers, and I'll see you soon. Bye.